This PowerPoint will go over some of the ideas in the first chapters of the Critical Thinking Thoughtful Writing text, as well as some tips and tricks on how you can improve your writing in English 1101. Most students in high school, or sometimes even in college, try to write essays the night before they're due, or the morning before they're due. And that's not a good habit to have. So using the writing process is something that will give you a good habit, so when a longer essay is required, it won't seem so daunting. The writing process is simply pre-writing, writing, and then revision. Pre-writing is a way to look at your topic and try to generate some ideas, look at the directions that you might go into that will ultimately feed into a thesis statement. Then you're going to write, gathering evidence, looking at examples, and reviewing the different ideas of things like purpose and audience. Finally, revision. After your manuscript is complete, you can look back in at the details and examples you might need to add, as well as proofreading for grammar and mechanics errors. Pre-writing ideas are simple. Pre-writing is something that you do for yourself. There's no time where you'll have to turn in a pre-writing assignment for an instructor. But this is a way that you can jot down ideas or maybe work with a topic to see what direction you want to take in your essay. Keeping a journal is a good idea, but also it doesn't have to be a journal. If you have a place to put notes on your phone, or if you can put a document in Google Docs, those are places where you can store your ideas so that when you sit down to actually write the essay later, you'll still have access to those. Free writing is also a good model to use if you are really stuck and have writer's block. If you give yourself a time limit, let's say write nonstop for 3 minutes, and don't worry about grammar, don't worry about punctuation, then what you'll do is kind of tap into your stream of consciousness, and you'd be amazed at how much you can write in a very short period of time. Once again, this isn't something that you would then hand in to an instructor. It's just something to use so that you can see what kind of ideas you have. And of course, brainstorming, listing, all those techniques that you've seen in different writing texts are fine to use, but just find a technique that works for you so that you have a way to look at the topic and narrow it down. Another part of the pre-writing process is knowing the criteria of the assignment. You want to know what kind of essay it is. Is it a narrative, a comparison, contrast? Am I asked to do any research for the paper? What's the topic? And are there specific guidelines? For English 1101, you will have specific guidelines to follow. The different topics and assignments come out of the textbook. But in other classes, you might want to make sure that you're following any guidelines your instructor gives you. And how long should it be? Well, usually there'll be a word count or a page count. But let me tell you a story that my graduate advisor told me. He once said that students will always ask how long a paper needs to be. And I always tell them, he said, it needs to be as long as a piece of string. I really didn't know what that meant when he first told me, but then he explained, if you have a box and you want to tie a piece of string around it to keep the contents in there, then think about it. If you have a very small box, it'll be a small piece of string. For a really large box, you'll need a lot. So if you're writing an essay that is an afternoon fishing with your grandfather and you want to show the reader how blessed you were to have that time with him, then that's probably going to be a fairly short piece of string because it's one afternoon. However, if you're writing a research paper on the role of women in the workplace in World War II, that's a pretty big piece of string. So obviously, you should make sure that you are reaching the word or page count that an instructor is given, but also think about how long does this need to be? How long does my piece of string need to be? And also you want to think about purpose. Do I want to entertain my audience, inform them, maybe relate an experience that I've had, or persuade them to do something? Any of these are fine, and you should have at least one with each essay, but you'll usually have a combination of them. If you don't think about your purpose, it may be a little more difficult to come up with a thesis statement that really solidifies where you want to take the essay. So always take a moment to decide, am I doing one of these four or a combination of different ones? And also think about your audience. Who's reading your work? Well, if it's a piece of academic writing, don't write just to your instructor. You want to write to everyone who is sitting in that class or everyone at the school. So if you think everyone in the freshman class at Rend Lake College will read this essay, it's going to help you look at a broad audience. You'll have different people reading, different genders, different races, people who've grown up in Southern Illinois, people who have grown up in other places. So that really means you've got a general audience. Obviously, if you're writing different things, like a message or a text, you can keep it informal with your friends, make it more formal for any professors or administrators or for your boss. And then if it's a business piece of writing, let's say it's a cover letter for an application, and find out who's going to read that letter, who's going to read that email. And we'll touch on some of these a little later in the semester. Also, think about tone and meaning. Tone of voice really matters, and because language is the only thing that your readers will see, you have to think about the meanings of the words that you choose and how you're saying them. So think about this. A quick example might be, "Excuse me," or "Get out of the way." Those carry two very distinct tones. But something that might not necessarily be as obvious would be the word immigrants versus the word illegals. If you are looking at those two words, they can be used on the same group of people. However, immigrants would be something where you want a positive reaction, versus illegals would be where you're accusatory toward that group of people. So you would want to think about the tone. If you write an essay where you are in support of people immigrating into the country, then obviously you'd want to use immigrants. Illegals would make it seem like you don't like them. So it's one of the things that, because a reader can't see you, can't hear you, think about your word choices very carefully. And also meaning. If you take a simple word like home, you want to look at the denotative meaning, which is the dictionary meaning of a word, but also the connotative meaning. What does it mean to you emotionally? For a lot of people, home is a place of safety or a place where you're loved. But you want to think about what's concrete and what's abstract, and those are the things you want to define. Concrete words, car, dog, book, I know what those are. But abstract words, what do you think justice is? It might be different than my definition. Or love might be different with every person that you ask. So tone and meaning are both places where you'll need to examine the language that you're choosing. And then when you focus that idea or that topic, what you want to do is to think about narrowing your choices. Many times students will tell me they want to write about television or they want to write about gun control. Those are really, really big topics. So if you want to write about television, think about how you could focus it. You can use those pre-writing techniques. And here, I've decided from television, I want to write about television series. And that takes me to one that I've watched, Game of Thrones. And writing about Game of Thrones might not at first seem like a good idea for an essay, but you know, there was that season finale, and I didn't like it. Neither did a lot of other people. So ultimately, I could focus it on what made me angry when I watched the season finale, the series finale of Game of Thrones. And when you do that, then you have something that you can start working with, and you can actually get to a thesis statement. And we'll take care of that in part 2.